World, what's going on? Good to see you again, and welcome to another episode of For the Good of All. And I'm your host, Lorenzo Chambers. Today is my first episode in the podcast studio, where we seek to inspire, to unify, to give purpose for being, for the good of all. Today, I want to talk about the idea of philanthropy a lot. And then I have a couple of real life social commentary situations that I want to briefly touch on. And before I begin, I wanted to just obviously talk a little bit about the website that I have. It's LC, the number 4, thegoodofall.com, lcforthegoodofall.com. Looking for people to join this community of thought partners, to share ideas in how we can move to live the highest version of ourselves as possible. And I'm looking for people to join and become members of the site, because I think that's how we build communities. And members will be getting exclusive invites to live streams. They'll be able to suggest topics, actually be in a collaborative relationship to share ideas that's on their minds, get invited to shows, also participate, ask questions, and some other perks. And if you guys have any ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. But yes, join me, become a member at lcforthegoodofall.com, the number 4, right? LC4. On YouTube, For the Good of All with Lorenzo Chambers. That's I would like you guys to subscribe to kind of keep this going. Instagram and TikTok, Lorenzo for the Good. I hope that you guys found value in what these conversations bring about and have an impact on your life. And hopefully there's some action that we're going to take moving forward. So that's the whole like, follow, subscribe, become a member spiel, if you will. And so now I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of philanthropy. So for this conversation, in my mind, philanthropy means engaging in endeavors that advance the well-being of humanity. That's how we're defining philanthropy. And I thought philanthropy was primarily around raising funds and fundraising. And so I actually had several careers in philanthropy, beginning in the, I'm going to say, mid to late 1980s. I worked at a nonprofit called Jobs for Youth. I was a youth coordinator, and then I went on to become the director of fundraising. I attended Columbia University's School of Philanthropy, and received a certificate, became a certified philanthropist, fundraiser, if you will. I want to talk about those terms a little later. After that, I moved on. I worked with the United Negro College Fund, UNCF, and it was awesome, obviously, because it was helping traditionally economically oppressed Black and brown people at the time. And so I had a stint doing that. From there, I was fortunate to be able to move on to Dartmouth College, my alma mater, and I worked in the major gifts division, which meant working with individual alumni who could consider 6-figure gifts or more, structured over a 3 to 5 year period. And finally, I actually had my own fundraising firm, the Alexander Group, that lasted about 2 years. And I worked with a school in Delray Beach, Florida. I secured their first $1 million gift towards their school, Village Academy, which to this day still exists. And so I've had what I think is an extensive career in fundraising. And the paradigm shift for me around the idea of philanthropy came when it dawned on me to ask the question of myself, why do I have to ask people to do the right thing, to share their resources, to help others? And so it was a game. I enjoyed the process, cultivating relationships, finding out interests. And then for big gifts, the idea, sometimes it could take 6 months to a year, over a year, before you actually ask for the monetary donation. And so the idea for me was philanthropy has to be bigger than people giving money, especially when wealthy people are giving money out of their excess, right? And not necessarily out of their base needs. I think it's easy to give out of your excess. And there are several different motivations to give. And I came to the conclusion or the idea that people should give because it's the right thing to do. They should give out of their heart, not necessarily for tax write-offs. That might come with it, but that can't be the primary motivating factor. Getting names on buildings, getting perks for family members. I think those are ulterior motives that aren't necessarily the root of what I think philanthropy should be. Is fundraising a part of philanthropy? Absolutely, but it is not the end-all, be-all. You can be philanthropic in every field of human endeavor based on your mindset. And the idea is to develop a philanthropic mindset. And so that means sharing your time, your talent, and your treasure, right? Most people think of treasure meaning making financial contributions. Your time and talent is as equally as important. And so, for example, a very good friend of mine, he's recently retired. He was a corporate attorney, mergers and acquisitions. And so he would volunteer his time and his talent and work on the board of directors of several nonprofits in his community. And so that's what I mean by volunteering and sharing time and talent, not only treasure. But also in every field of human endeavor, there's an opportunity to do something to advance the well-being for humanity. For example, I'm here in New York City, sanitation workers, we couldn't live without them. And sometimes we demean the vocations that actually sustain us, which is mind-blowing to me. And so the sanitation worker who approaches his or her work from the vantage that they are actually helping to curb, eliminate, stop diseases in community by picking up our garbage and keeping it sanitized, keeping it clean. And so when they approach their work from that mindset, people do their jobs better, right? My mom, always said, whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability, whatever that is. And I think that is applicable to every walk of human life. And so I want to encourage you all to develop a mindset that represents you as a human being, which says, hey, whatever I'm doing is for the well-being, right? And advancement of human beings. So teachers, we teach because we want the next generation to be better than we were, to make better decisions for the good of all. Lawyers, doctors, whatever you do, child care workers, do it for the good of all. And I think that's super important. And so I want to talk a little bit more about mindset. I want to reference Carol Dweck, PhD, Dr. Carol Dweck, has a book. It's entitled Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Throughout many of the podcast episodes, I will be mentioning several books that I've read. I think reading is fundamental. I think we're not in a better place as human beings because we don't read. So I'm always going to reference books. I think you guys should take notes, rewind, record, whatever you need to do, and then read. So Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol S. Dweck, Dr. Carol S. Dweck. And so she talks about fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets. And so in referencing, and then she talks about different areas, and she compares a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So for example, when it comes to challenges, someone with a fixed mindset tends to avoid challenges, whereas someone with a growth mindset embraces the challenge and leans into it as an opportunity. When it comes to putting forth effort, oftentimes people who have fixed mindsets, they see effort as fruitless or worse, and they don't want to make the effort. I think in part because they may self-sabotage, because if you make an effort and you fail, then what does that mean? Versus not making an effort, and then you can always have the excuse of why you did not succeed. Whereas people with a growth mindset, when it comes to effort, they see effort as the path to mastery, right? So you make an effort, you fail, you get better, you learn, you reflect, you improve, you change, you grow, right? The effort is the path to mastery. When it comes to obstacles, people with fixed mindsets often give up easily. They don't persevere through adversity. Whereas people with a growth mindset, they persist in the face of obstacles to get over the challenge. When it comes to criticism, as you can imagine, people with a fixed mindset ignore useful feedback. They don't want to hear, they can't take it. Person with a growth mindset receives criticism and learns from the feedback, right? And I would say if you can become your own best critic and be honest with yourself and give yourself honest feedback, you may not have to hear it from the outside so much. But the two go hand in hand. And when it comes to the success of others, people with fixed mindset, they feel threatened by the success of others, right? It's a reflection of their lack of success. Whereas people with a growth mindset, the success of others, we, people with a growth mindset, find these lessons and inspiration of successful people inspiring, right? There's a lesson to learn, there's a model to follow, there's a formula to success, and so you have to work through it. People with a growth mindset also engage in some of the following behaviors. They reflect on experiences where they learn something new through maximum effort in a challenging situation. People with a growth mindset are curious to learn and grow from mistakes by self-correcting, right? Seeking people who know more than them to learn from. So having a mentor is super, super important. And also, lastly, people with a fixed mindset constantly ask questions in order to learn more. And so I want to encourage you to ask questions until you understand, until you figure it out. There are no dumb questions. Be mindful, think it through, and grow and get better. And I think that that's super, super important. And so with that, I'm going to say to all of you by yourselves, wherever you are, give yourself permission to be honest. Do you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? That's between you and yourself and the walls. And so be honest and make some decisions. I think that would be super important. So why should we care about engaging in life actions that create winning scenarios for all humanity? The irony lies in the idea that sometimes being selfish can be a selfless act. If one takes care of himself or herself emotionally, spiritually, and physically, that person increases the chances of being of service and good use to others. We can serve ourselves for the purpose of serving others. Why? Because we are all one people. So just another excerpt from my book, For the Good of All and to the Harm of None. I'm going to encourage you guys to seek that out and pick that up. The other idea in terms of fixed mindsets, growth mindsets, there's also the idea of closed-mindedness. And the most dangerous person to be closed-minded are people who have resources, billionaires, not just monetary, but power, access to power, political power, economic power. A lot of that boils down, unfortunately, to financial resources. And I just think that universally, from a humane point of view, no matter how hard you've worked for your resources, whether you inherited them, whatever, I think there's a responsibility to be responsible with those resources, to no harm to yourself, right? For the good of all and to the harm of none. You can do better for the good of all and harm fewer. And why wouldn't you, right? I think that that's a challenge. because the highest version of yourself, regardless of your resources, is to become the type of person who can be trusted with resources for the purpose of contributing to the well-being of not only yourself, your family, but also to your fellow man. This mindset could end suffering, especially for people who do not look like you. All of the calamity of the world, many of them, could be totally eradicated in a relatively short time. Years, not decades, and definitely not 50 and 100-year spans. The mindset change is the factor. So the takeaway is philanthropy, engaging in endeavors that advance the well-being of humanity on a simple basis. Lady needs help with her groceries. She needs help crossing the street, right? A little boy needs shoes tied, right? An act of kindness goes a long way, and you'll be amazed at what people remember over time. Speaking as a former educator, I guess I'm always going to be an educator, but I'm not formal in the role. I've recently retired, but I worked at my school for nearly 2 decades, and I had the opportunity for 4th and 5th graders who attended my school, now becoming adults, some of them having children of their own, and coming back to say, hey, Mr. Chambers, thank you. Thank you for what you helped me do, the way you influenced my thought, helped me make good decisions. And it's good. That's the return on the investment of that type of work. And you cannot do that work seeking a reward because, again, it was 10, 15, almost 20 years when some of these students would return and share their good memories. And so that's super important. And I think all of us can be that person for someone when we develop a philanthropic mindset. So work with that idea. I think that's something that's obviously near and dear to my heart. With that in mind, I wanted to shift gears slightly, and I want to touch briefly on 3, I don't even know what to call them, societal events, the current events that are happening around us from a perspective of for the good, right? So Spain, Argentina, World Cup final, I did a reel on that on some of my social media. But for me, the idea was sportsmanship. And after Spain won the World Cup and Argentina turned their backs on them, that's unacceptable. I think there needs to be severe consequences. I'm going to do a whole nother episode on consequences, but I think a lot of things are happening because consequences are not severe enough to deter behaviors. And so in this case, Argentina, I don't know, maybe they get excluded from the next World Cup. There has to be some severe penalty for that not to happen again. Maybe it's a monetary consequence, but I would challenge even the Argentinian fans to hold your team accountable, right? Because if not, you're complicit in that behavior. And so I think maybe the fans don't go to some of the games, but your behaviors reveal who you are, right? And so having experienced what Argentina did in the World Cup, not just the final, but throughout, Messi included, I think if the fans don't hold them accountable, then that's a problem. So, but more importantly, the message that they're sending to young people is also unacceptable, and it shouldn't happen. And as someone who's been in the arena, I played football, you have to respect your opponent. The hard work, the effort, the talent, the skill, the combat is in the arena. And if you can't respect your opponent, I'm going to venture and go out on a limb and say, you don't deserve to be in the arena. And so Argentina, do better. Fans, do better, hold them accountable. The system, do better, hold them accountable. And so let's see what happens moving forward. What do we do as just individuals? I probably won't watch. I love soccer. I learned about it when I lived in Italy years back. And I probably won't ever watch Argentina again. So that's just my small contribution that makes me feel good. So, What makes you feel good? What are your thoughts about the Spain-Argentina match? Not just the match, but Argentina's behavior. Do you have any thoughts on consequences for them? Like, how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again, if that's even possible? So I would like to hear back some feedback from you guys. You can contact me through the website lcforthegoodofall.com. Also, my email is maxalexander63@gmail.com. Once again, maxalexander63@gmail.com. And so we'll be communicating, hopefully, in this community that grows with membership. The second piece that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the Nolan Wells tragedy, the tragic death of this young man in Mississippi, I believe. If you guys are not familiar with it, just a brief summary, goes on a boat trip with some of his friends. The friends come back, he doesn't come back. Authorities aren't alerted immediately. Then when the Mississippi authorities get involved, there's the idea that he drowned. But, Al Sharpton, attorney Ben Crump, others are involved. Foul play definitely happened. If you're on social media, you've been hearing some updates. I've been getting the updates. And it's apparent that he was murdered, and there's a big cover up, and the system is a part of that. Judges, lawyers, family members. There are people who are speaking up to do the right thing. And again, at the end of the day, this has to stop, right? Again, consequences. Let's find out the truth. I think being aware and sharing it and putting the energy into the universe through your voice so that the collective consciousness rises and something is done. And so I want to contribute my voice to the Nolan Wells tragic death and be supportive of his family, and hope that the appropriate consequences are dealt with. And they're very severe. Taking a life is very severe. And so say his name. And yeah, I've been talking about the Carmelo Anthony situation down in Texas, I believe. That was a situation where, unfortunately, Anthony Carmelo stabbed Austin Metcalf. I wanted to say his name as well because he didn't deserve to die. However, that situation could have been avoided if people were being good to one another. And so if you're not familiar with that situation, track meet in Texas, it starts to rain, thunder, lightning, it's pouring. Everyone is seeking some type of shelter. Carmelo Anthony goes to the tent in the stands, those portable tents, and he's not welcome there by Austin Metcalf and his family and friends, his brother maybe, I don't know for sure. However, the bottom line is Carmelo Anthony was by himself. There's video that shows that he was surrounded, he was harassed, somebody put hands on him, allegedly Austin Metcalf. Carmelo Anthony felt threatened. He pulls a knife out of his bag. My understanding is the knife was like it was a small knife, legally sized knife. He stabs Austin Metcalf and kills him. That should not have happened. I think when the mindset is a growth mindset and we are all human beings, right? Race is a social construct. And again, it's going to take maybe another generation or two before the real change happens, but the conversation starts now and it starts here, right? And so had Austin Metcalf and his cronies been kind to Carmelo Anthony, this would not have happened. It should not have happened. I do not condone the taking of a life. I understand protecting oneself and fearing for one's life. However, I don't think that Carmelo Anthony received a fair trial. It was definitely not a trial by a jury of his peers. There were no human beings on that jury who looked like him. In fact, human beings that looked like him were excluded from the jury. And there was a mindset of those jurors, along with possibly attorneys and judges, et cetera. But to deliberate for 3 hours, only 3 hours, to decide the fate of someone's life and not to take into consideration all of the ramifications and variables as to what led to what happened is a crime in and of itself, which should be investigated, by the way. Yeah, so you deliberate for 3 hours and you give this young man 35 years to life. That doesn't seem right. Do I think there should be a consequence? For sure, right? Should he do jail time? I will go out on a limb and say for sure. But I don't think murder in the first degree is the right call. I think accidental homicide, manslaughter, somewhere along those lines would probably be fair. So again, if you're in Texas and you can kind of have your voice heard, please contribute a verse to the poem of life. So with that, we'll conclude this episode of For the Good of Lorenzo Chambers, For the Good of All podcast. Let's continue to inspire, unify, and live with purpose.